Okay, our usual housekeeping announcements. Please turn off your mic and your video until you're asked to comment. You can ask questions at any time using the chat box or in the Q&A session by raising your hand. Use the little icon on the screen. When you're invited to speak, remember to unmute and turn on your video, but not until you're invited to speak. Webinar recordings will be available on the Empower channels, and the slide deck will also be available to you. The main objective of this webinar is to give you a chance to ask questions. I will try and summarize the key points of Module 10, the dissertation, the PSM plan options, and then invite questions. Our agenda for today will just a few minutes on the housekeeping, then we go into Module 10, Option A, which is the dissertation. And I'll try and describe the key points in about 30 minutes. And there'll be a Q&A session for 10 minutes around dissertation. Then I will try and spend about 30 minutes to describe the PSM plan, and then a second Q&A session of around 10 minutes. So firstly, if you are ready to write Module 10, congratulations. You've been through a lot on the course, 9 modules already. The mountain is nearly. Or option B, you can try and write a PSM plan, a procurement and supply chain plan, in the global fund format for your organization or for your country. You have to decide at the outset which one you want to do, A or B. What I would suggest, those of you that are going to go on and do the master's degree course, you will need to write a dissertation for the master's degree course. So if you're thinking about doing the master's degree course, maybe it's better to choose option B, the PSM plan now, and then do the dissertation as part of the master's course. Okay? But you make the choice, either a dissertation or a PSM plan. This first presentation will be around the dissertation. In this dissertation, we really want you to look at what you have learned and apply it across the whole of the project that you're choosing. Preferably, it's a situation in your own country or your own region. Identify a problem, research the problem, and then how it can be addressed. Outstanding dissertations, we will do our best to try and get them published, and some have already been displayed at various sites, particularly around Africa, regional sites, which have been particularly useful and beneficial. In order to write the dissertation, you have to understand the overall health aims and policies of your country or region, if you're doing a region. You need to know about the overall funding environment for health in your country. And that means finding out what the total pharmaceutical expenditure is, not just the total health expenditure. It requires researching a level of detail, and that's difficult. And it requires quite a lot of work to do that. Identifying the strengths and weaknesses of the health supply chain operation in your country. And that means that you have to read and read and read and absorb a lot of information, background and general information, in order to be able to write the dissertation. Fortunately, for most countries, there's a lot of information available. So this first section is around dissertation. Part 2 will be around the PSM plan. What is this dissertation? It's a typed, written document between 10 and 15 pages, plus the annexes, plus the extras, presented in electronic format. You don't have to print it. You can if you wish, but it's not a requirement to pass the course. So around 10 to 15 pages, that's the dissertation in electronic format. The dissertation is not especially hard or difficult, but it does require that you undertake some basic planning. If you don't plan it, you will fail. does require that you commit the time and the effort to its production. And one of the key problems is that most people try to be far too ambitious. You've only got around 3 months' time to do this. You can't undertake a major research activity. It's got to be something relatively simple and straightforward. Plan how you're going to undertake the dissertation. Plan how and when you're going to make the major decisions for your dissertation. Understand the implications of the decisions. Plan what you are going to do. Plan the time that you will allocate. And plan how you're going to monitor your own progress to see that you're moving along. Most people are too ambitious and they take too long on the dissertation because they don't plan it. If you would plan it, you would see, oh, that's too difficult, that's too complicated, that's going to take me 6 months. So we try to look at simple problems, simple solutions that can be researched simply. The format is in PDF, but of course you will write it in something like Word. Any PDF format is fine. Write it in Word or any word processor and then convert it to PDF. It needs to be in English unless you're doing the French language course, and then of course it's in French. You can use pretty much any font, but it's got to be clear. So either Arial or Times New Roman, 12-point text so we can read it. No little 9-point tiny text, please. And it should be in A4 paper size. It's got to be original work. And you've got to show your logic and analysis. You can't just say, I know. That is not going to get you through a dissertation. Ideally, it's something connected with your country that you can use and present to the supply team in your country or to your supervisor. You need to work independently, but you are encouraged to discuss this with your colleagues and related departments and seek their views and their inputs and understandings. Talk to them, interview them, ask questions. Total length, 10 to 15 pages, not including all the cover pages and all the annexes that go with it. Should be a professional manner, title page, clearly put there, put your name on it. Around 60% arrive with no name on, and we have no idea where it's from. We have to try and trace the email address. Put your name on it and the designation, organization, where you're from, the country you're from. Okay, it needs to be original. Do not try to copy a project report and say that's your dissertation. Like all universities, we use anti-plagiarism software, and it will detect pieces that are copied. 10 to 15 pages. If it's short, we'll reject it. We don't accept 2 to 3 page dissertations. It needs to be within that bounds, 10 to 15 pages. If you go more, that's okay. There's no penalties for long ones, but there's no extra marks for long dissertations. What counts as original? Well, you can collect some new evidence. It can be a survey. Doesn't have to be direct. You don't have to go and count boxes in the warehouse, or you can if you wish. You can make a questionnaire and survey people in the supply chain and ask for their opinions. Or you can analyze existing data. So you can take a project report and analyze the data in a different way. That's original. That's okay. Looking for a different conclusion. Or you can take a project report, which has got a data analysis, and look at a new solution. So, well, they tried to do it this way and that didn't work. I want to try and do it a different way. Maybe that will work. That's original, that's new, that's okay. Or you can reach a new conclusion. There is a problem, it is a solution, it's got a good chance of working, but it costs too much, we can't do it, or something like that. But you need to have an element of original If it's all from a project report, it's not going to pass. You have to do some original thinking. What can you use that's not original? You can use data from other reports and publications, provided you cite the source. You can use quotations and extracts, but again, provided you cite the source. You can use solutions suggested by other parties, used in other countries, provided you cite the source. You can reach the same conclusion as other reports, provided you cite the source and say what's different this time. So you can use lots of existing information, provided you bring at least one element that is original to it. What you have to do, select one area of weakness in the health supply chain. Describe the problem, quoting published evidence. And we want to see at least 2 publications. Not, I know it's a problem. That's not going to get you a pass. What is the problem? At least 2 reports citing that this is a problem. And often there's many reports available. Confirm it's a problem by collecting original evidence. You could go to the warehouse and actually count boxes, or you go to the clinic and count boxes, or you could make a little survey form, a questionnaire, and pass it around your colleagues and see what their opinion is. Then you're going to formulate a solution. You've identified the problem, you've done some research, you've proven this is a problem. Now you're going to try and find some solutions. Make an action plan for implementing that solution. Make some key performance indicators for measuring the progress of the action plan. You don't have to implement the action plan. What you're talking about is describing how you're going to do it and how you're going to measure the progress with these key performance indicators. You need to formulate an outline budget. Only needs to be an outline, not looking at detailed costings. And we'll help you with some unit prices around that sort of thing. We can guide you along the way there. And again, it's only a crude budget. We're not looking at a detailed budget. What we're looking at is this $10,000 or $1 million. Where does it come in between? Just give us some kind of indication on the budget. So we're going to identify, document, research, formulate a solution, action plan, and a budget. Key points around this: evidence. Who says it's a problem? How do you know it's a problem? At least 2 published references. How serious is the problem? What do people think about it? Do some research. You can use a questionnaire, or you can do a literature review. That's okay. You'll search all the literature that's available to say how much of a problem it is. Solution. Formulate a solution to the problem. Who else has tried this? Did it work? At least 1 published reference. How will you measure it? Some key performance indicators, and at least 1 reference that these KPI work. Someone else has used them and it worked. Selecting your PSM area and a problem. Now, most countries have got published reports. If your country has a global fund grant, it absolutely certainly has got many published reports all about the problems. Here is an example from Zambia. And there's a whole list of problems, but in this list of problems, it says expiry of antiretrovirals, $4 million. Now, you shouldn't be having expiry of ARVs, and certainly not at that level, at $4 million. So that's a problem. And it's relatively easy to address expiry of medicine. There's lots of other problems in the list. So look at the list of problems, do a bit of research, what's the problem in your country, and pick 1 item, only 1. Don't try and solve every problem. Just pick 1 item. And I'm going to use this as an example. We're going to pick the expiry of the antiretrovirals. You don't have to use global fund information. You can use any published source of evidence, and there's lots of them. There's lots of USAID reports, there's lots of different bodies and reports about all the problems in the health supply chain in your country. Spend a little time, do some research, look at what the published problems are. Then think about the solutions. The point here is choose a problem that is solvable. If you say, well, the only way to solve this problem is to employ 300 new staff and spend $10 million, frankly, I don't think the Ministry of Health is going to listen to you. So choose something that is simple and relatively easy to do, but can have a big impact. So in this Zambia example, doing something about the ARV expiry should be relatively easy, relatively simple. So you're going to do some research around that. What's the current rate of expiry? How much are we getting expired now? Where are the goods expiring? Expiring at the central stores, or is it down at the hospitals? Why is the expiry occurring? And that's difficult, but you could try a questionnaire. You could ask staff who are working in the supply chain, why do you think we're getting all this expiry? And take their opinions. That's a piece of original research. Relatively easy to do, a questionnaire with perhaps 10 or 15 questions. Go to 10 or 15 people, you've collected evidence, you can analyze it. Then you're going to suggest a solution, and you can consult with other people. We encourage you to discuss it with other people. What can we do about this expiry rate? So in essence, look at the problems, see what is practical, see what you think can be addressed relatively easily. Before you start the dissertation, you have to complete a one-page outline. And in that outline, you have to say, what's your chosen PSM problem? How did you identify the problem? You did some research. How are you going to measure the problem? I'm going to have a questionnaire. How am I going to get solutions to the problem? I'm going to think up some ideas and I'm going to discuss it with my colleagues, what we call the Delphi system. You're going to prepare an action plan for implementing that. The solution might be, I'm going to do staff training. I'm going to train all the staff to be aware about expiry dates. Then how am I going to do that? How am I going to implement that training? That's my action plan. How am I going to measure that the problem has been reduced? Well, that would be the expiry rate. That would be my key performance indicator. Has my rate of expiry reduced? Okay. Then you put some initial research, you put that together in a one-page format. And we submit that to the tutor who reviews it, perhaps discusses it with you, and then tells you to proceed. So there's the one-page format. You just fill that in, basically, what information is available, what are the key problems, what's your decision on the problem you want to try and address. It just shows you've done a little bit of research and that you've thought about what you want to do for the dissertation. This one-page outline is not marked, but it is reviewed. The tutor, which is often me, will review it and say, yeah, that looks fine, please proceed. Or maybe you need to think a little bit more about what you're doing. And then you need to make a Gantt chart, a time scale of what you're going to do. So what's the area you're going to study? What's the current status of PSM? Perhaps you're going to spend a week to collect that information. What are the key problems in PSM? You're going to do a bit of research. What are the key published problems in PSM? Perhaps 2 or 3 days. And then choose a problem area. Why is that so important? And so on down the list, putting together the decisions and the time scale, what you need to achieve at each stage. Tutors are available to assist you. You can email or ask via Priya or ask by the forum for what you want. But you must do the work. The tutor can only guide you. They can't do the research for you. They can't write the dissertation for you. They can help you source some information if you're having problems. They can help you with a few ideas if you get stuck, a few proposals, and perhaps point you to other countries and see what they've done if you get stuck. So tutors are there to assist, but they cannot do the work for you. You have to do the work. So what is the structure? Front page, you're going to have the title, your name, again, put your name on it. Many arrive with no name on. You need an abstract and executive summary. The abstract should not be longer than 300 words. Expiry of antiretrovirals was identified as a problem. We researched the problem. We identified it was slow movement from central level down to province level that was causing the issue. We've reworked how we do that. All the staff have been trained in keeping a close eye on expiry dates. We believe it will be better in future. That's the abstract. Table of contents. If you want to use the automatic table of contents from Word, that's okay. Just the section numbers and the page numbers. Any abbreviations or acronyms that you're using, any words that are not in English language, please translate them into English language and put them in there. So you can keep the original words. If you're in Indonesia, you can talk about puskesmas for health centers. Just put in the front end the abbreviation that puskesmas equals health center. Again, with any long abbreviations that you've got, MOH, SCW, Ministry of Health and Social Community Workers, something like that, put that in the abbreviations. You need a background section, just general information. What's the population of your country? What's the brief geography? How easy is it to distribute supplies? If you want to do a region, that's okay for a region as well, same information. You might choose to do SADC, South Africa, Common Area, or ECOWAS, for, again, Africa, or you might choose to do Pacific Island groupings like that. That's fine if you want to do regional. Background structure around the regional population, income level, basic health information. You don't need a lot. You're only looking at one page. Current status. What's the status for health commodities? There's lots of published reports to help you with that. And one of the key documents there is the country pharmaceutical profile. And many countries have got a country pharmaceutical profile. And that's where a lot of this information is. So you're going to talk about the general situation using evidence, citing where you got this information from. What are the problems in PSM? What are the key gaps? Why have you chosen your problem? And what do you know about it already? And what don't you know about it? For the expiry of antiretrovirals, I know it's a problem because it's a published one. We don't know why. So I'm going to research why it's a problem. Then we're going to collect the evidence. And again, it's important to state what's not available. Sometimes there's very little information available on particular areas. If you look at expiry rates, very few countries actually tell them what their expiry rate is. So I know there's a particular problem on my antiretrovirals, but I don't know what the general commodity expiry rate is, and it might not be there. So that's a point to highlight. What's available, what's not available. Then how are you going to get the information you need? Perhaps you're going to use a survey, a questionnaire to key players. How did you design the questionnaire? I just thought it up. Well, okay, but perhaps you need to do some research on other questionnaires, what other people have used, look at one or two and say, well, I reviewed these documents and came up with my ideas. New information. I need to verify, is it really correct? Check with a couple of people if that's really so. If I ask 12 people, only one person tells me of one issue, that's not really very good. I want 2 or 3 people at least to tell me that this is a problem, to verify it's correct. Then I've got my key gaps. How am I going to address those gaps? So collecting evidence all the time. Then I'm going to formulate a solution. How am I going to address this problem? I've got this expiry of my ARVs. Am I going to use any new approaches, any new technologies, any new systems? Well, for expiry, probably not. I just need to do a lot more training so that people understand about expiry dates and they monitor and they check expiry dates. Why do these approaches have a good chance of success? Has it been used in another country? Bit of research, has it been tried? Yes, it's worked well in this country. If it's not been tried before, that's okay. Why is it not being tried before? Maybe perhaps it's expensive. People don't have the technology. And then an outline action plan to address the problem. It only needs to be outlined. I'm going to train operators. What's my action plan for training them? I'm going to have to write a curriculum. I'm going to have to find trainers, trainers of trainers, and then deliver the training. Monitoring and money, I need some key performance indicators. If I'm doing expiry rates, it's easy. I'm going to monitor the expiry rate. That's my key performance indicator. Outline budget, simple Excel sheet. Don't need a lot of things. If you've got problems on unit costs, we'll help you with some guideline unit costs. If I'm doing training, what's it going to cost me to hire a place to do the training? How am I going to do trainer of trainers? What's that going to cost me? Well, how much am I going to pay the trainers? I got to pay per diems to people attending the course, like that. Then I need a risk assessment and risk mitigation. What's the risk something's going to go wrong with my training? Well, not very much. Maybe they don't turn up to the training. Maybe they don't do anything after they've trained. How can I mitigate that? How can I reduce the risk?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, can we mute, please? Thank you. Okay. All right. So what can we do about the risk? How can we reduce them? So this is the sort of outline budget. That's all we need. 1 page. Don't need a lot of detail. I'm going to do training of trainers. Maybe I'll bring some international trainers. Maybe I'll use the local university, whatever we think might do 10 days. We can put some basic costs around that. We can help you with unit costs if need be. And what I'm looking for is just a ballpark figure. Is this intervention going to cost $10,000 or $100,000 or $1 million? Risk assessment and mitigation, only a basic risk assessment. What could go wrong? Well, if I'm doing this training, maybe nobody comes to the training. I hire a hall, I got trainers there, and nobody comes. Nobody arrives to help out. We can measure the risk just on a simple heat map of yellow, orange, red. So red means it's a big risk, a big problem. And then I'm going to look at mitigating. Yeah. Sorry, can we mute, please? Good, thank you. And then how can I reduce the risk? How can I mitigate the risk? Yeah, can we go to mute, please? Good. All right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So mainly we want to see that you thought about the risk. This is a risk heat map. This is a global fund risk heat map. Relatively straightforward to do. Okay. And again, on my Zambia example, it would be poor attendance. Nobody turns up for the training. I could get the minister to issue an instruction. People are more likely to attend if the minister sends them a letter. Poor absorption, they come to the training, but they don't learn anything. What can I do about that? Try and make the learning interesting and exciting for them. Not just talk and chalk, something that's really useful to their everyday life. And then finally, I might get poor implementation. They've come to the training, but they don't do anything. They never follow it through. And then that I need to have follow-up sessions, follow-up training to do. That's my risk and that's my mitigation together. Poor attendance, try and get the minister to do a letter. Poor absorption, make the training interesting and relevant. Poor implementation, do follow-up. do refresher sessions on the training, risk and mitigation. Okay, so one of the risk mitigations I can do is review progress regularly, check with finance that everything is okay and that the audit trail is good, product risk that the product is available all the time, and the government oversight that they are checking everything that's going on. So those are also examples of risk mitigation that we can follow. The ending pages, they need a clear conclusion. How is it going? Appendices, you can make those as long as you want. Where put the questionnaire in there, put the answers to the questionnaires. You can add an index if you want. It's not compulsory, but if you want to add one, that's fine. But overall, I need a clear conclusion. We identified expiry as a risk. We researched it to find out why it was occurring and where it was occurring. And we formulated a solution which was staff training. Those are my conclusions. So how does it look on progress? By the end of 1 month, you should have completed the first sections of the dissertation. What's the overall status of PSM? What are the key problems in PSM? What are the key gaps in PSM? What's your chosen problem to study? Why have you selected this problem? And how are you going to collect the evidence? That needs to be there at the end of month 1. By the end of month 2, you should have completed collecting the evidence and completed the dissertation sections on how you designed the information gathering tool, your questionnaire, new information that you collected and you verified it, more than one person raised that point, key gaps in the specific areas and the problems, how you're going to solve the problems. So evidence, analysis, problems and solutions by the end of month 2. By the end of month 3, formulate the solution, complete the dissertation, ready for submission. So solution, action plan, budget, and the risk management. In summary, it's not that hard. It does require planning. It does require research. You can't say, I know. I'm sure you do. That in itself will not get you grant funding to do anything. You have to use published evidence as well. Guidance and support is available, but you must do the work. Okay, now we're ready for our first question and answer session. Do we have anything in the chat box first? Okay. For the master's course, yes. Your only option is the dissertation when you are doing the master's. And the master's dissertation is longer and more detailed than this one. For the postgraduate diploma course that you're doing now, dissertation is 10 to 15 pages. For the master's degree, it's 25 pages plus. You don't get the PSM option on the master's course. How do we inform to empower what option we have selected? You do that on the 1-page format, either dissertation or the PSM plan. We'll follow with the PSM plan soon, but either way, you need to send the 1-page format in. That's how you communicate your option. Yes, the slide deck will be shared with everybody. You can find it on the Empower sites, as well as this webinar. Okay, I spoke a lot and I spoke rather fast. If we've got any questions around the dissertation, we have around 10 minutes. Tutors, you can ask via the forum or you can send a request to Priya, who will put you in touch with your tutor for the course.
Good day, Prof.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Stephen. Esumobi from Nigeria, Pharmacy Council of Nigeria.
Yes, go ahead.
You know, in some government establishments, they may want to need, before you get some of those information, they may want to need a letter, a reference from the school before they give you some relevant information. I don't know how we go about that.
You request it. It's quite common. We do issue such letters. We've had a request in the last 2 weeks for one such letter. If you request it, we will issue it. It's not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
And most universities do that if required. I can't guarantee they're going to give you the information, but I can guarantee we're going to give you the letter to request it. Not all countries want to share some of their sensitive information.
Okay.
Is there a specific deadline for submission of final dissertation? We normally recommend within 3 months of starting it, but we don't have a specific deadline. We will allow you longer if required.
It's okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Soft documents of this guidance, how can you access on it as we are doing master's program? Okay, you need to complete this section, this module 10 first, then you'll go on to part 2 of the master's program. In the master's program, you'll write a much more detailed and longer dissertation. So if you're doing the master's program, you might want to choose the PSM option in this module 10. And then you'll do a dissertation for the masters. If you want to do 2 dissertations, that's fine. There's no problem. You do it for the postgraduate and you do it for the masters, but the masters is longer, more detailed, more complex. There is soft copy guidance that's available on the module in PDF Word format to guide you through. And these webinars are also available on the Empower site on the webinar links. And you get the slide deck from here as well. Is anyone else who would like to speak? Please raise your hand and I'll try and get to you. Okay, for the master's program, you will get the briefing on the dissertation required for the masters when you get to that level in the master's course. Generally, when you get to around module 7 in the postgraduate course, you can start looking at module 10, maybe start thinking about what you want to do, but you don't actually have to do it until you reach module 10. How many dissertations for the master's program? At least 25 pages, and there's lots more detail required as well. That's in the master's program briefing. Today is around postgraduate diploma. If you want to raise your hand and speak, that's okay. If that's easier than typing in the chat box. Stephen, we've already got to you. Anyone else? Not many questions, so it must be too easy, yeah?
Hello, Prof. I just want a confirmation.
Yep, go ahead.
Yes, you said for those who are doing the 24-month master's program.
Yep.
Do you still have to do the write-up for the PGD?
Yes, that's why I'm suggesting if you're going to do module 10 on the PGD before you go to part 2 of the masters, you might want to do the PSM plan option. Yeah, otherwise you're going to do 2 dissertations. Yeah, you're going to do one for the PGD and one for the second part of the master's course. Yeah, so maybe to split it up, you do the PSM plan option as part of the PGD section and then do the dissertation as part of the second part masters. And we're coming on to the PSM plan in around 5 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Share the presentation. Yes, all our expert session presentation slide decks are shared with all people who register for the webinar. You'll also find the webinar recording on the PSM site on the Empower site under webinars. It seems everyone is too easy, so you have to write around 10 to 15 pages on a subject. Okay, then let me ask you, how many of you have read the Global Fund Audit Report for supply chain in your country? Anybody? Never read the Global Fund Audit Report for your country? No. Then how are you going to select a PSM problem for your dissertation if you've never read the audit report? So nearly everyone on here today, their country receives a Global Fund grant. Okay, Quenso, okay, thank you. You have, okay, good. All right. We need to be invited in several online modules. I don't quite understand that. Okay, Oscar, perhaps you can unmute and ask me the question. The expert sessions are open to everyone who is on the course. You should receive notification of them. It's also on Facebook. If you follow the Empower Facebook page, you'll see all the expert sessions advertised. Okay, I see I've got a few minutes left, so you should receive invites to all of them. The joint one with Central Medical Authority, good. Don't have to use the Global Fund Audit Report. You can use any assessment report. Yeah. So thank you, Joseph, for that. Yeah. Dissertation should not be focused on country of origin. Yes, that's okay. It doesn't need to be your country of origin. It just needs to be a country you are familiar with. Country of preference, yes. No problem there. Although I don't recommend that you select the USA, but okay. Other than that, then that's fine, no problem. You can use pretty much whichever country you want. Many people in Southeast Asia are working outside their host country, so that's fine as well. That's a regular one, no problem. Okay, last chance for questions, last 1 minute, and then we'll go on to the PSM plan. Would be nice to be from your country of origin to have an impact in your own country, certainly so, yes. But any country you're familiar with, any country you wish to undertake the research on is fine. Okay, then we'll go to part 2, which is the PSM plan, and come back for a Q&A session on that. Okay, so for this PSM plan, I'm going to talk primarily about the Global Fund, that is TGF, the Global Fund approach to PSM planning. Don't have to follow the Global Fund PSM plan, but most of your countries will have a Global Fund PSM plan. So that's probably more readily available, and the information on it is more readily available. Most owners have similar requirements to the Global Fund. The Global Fund has the best documented policies and information, which are freely available online. That doesn't mean that they are good or easy. They are the best. Some donors, it's really difficult to understand what they want in their PSM plans. So it does require a fair amount of research, a fair amount of work to understand the PSM plan. And the first understanding is why we need to do this PSM plan. So understand the PSM plan is a legal, contractual, financial, binding document. You put something in the PSM plan and don't do it, it will cost the country a lot of money. Country will be fined under international law. The donor will extract money from the country because you wrote it and didn't do it. So understand the PSM plan is legal, contractual, and financial. And the overall aim is to ensure that we get health products of acceptable quality to the beneficiaries. That's the key point. But understand, it's not just a report I can write anything. It is contractual. A government to agency contract. Failing to implement, doing something different will involve severe financial penalties and possibly other sanctions as well. In addition to the Global Fund, there's also the UN consolidated support for PSM plans. But I'm going to talk mainly about the Global Fund because all countries present today will have a Global Fund grant and will need to write a PSM plan. The point around the PSM plan is it follows the golden rule. And in case you don't know, the golden rule is the one with the gold, they make the rules. And the people with the gold are the Global Fund. So they make the rules. So if you want their gold, you have to follow their rules. Not the rules that you might want to follow, sometimes not even the rules of your own country. You have to follow the Global Fund rules. That's the contract you signed. Within this, there is the anti-corruption and transparency and accountability mechanisms, what is called the ACTA. So even with this PSM plan, even with all this activity, each year they lose about $500 billion in corruption and fraud. And that's one of the reasons that the PSM plan is so important, because by clearly stating what we're going to do, it limits the potential for fraud and corruption. And generally speaking, health products are about 50 to 60% of a Global Fund grant. So it's a lot of money. It's a big slice of the grant that goes into the PSM plan. Okay? And countries that have corruption and fraud and which are detected are forced to pay back and are fined and have to pay compensation. And you'll see this regularly on Global Fund audit reports. So these PSM plans are important because they are contractual and financial documents, and they help to reduce the rate of fraud and corruption. So we look at fraud and corruption here. We look at different ones. $4 million, this is on a PSM plan. So the country had to pay $4 million because they didn't follow, they didn't observe all the requirements of the PSM plan. That's the contractual document that we're talking about developing. And you see lots of these Global Fund audit reports and Global Fund recoveries, getting the money back when it has not been used correctly. So fraud, there is now a whistleblower system to report fraud, and that fraud is based on the PSM plan. You said you would do this in the PSM plan. If you don't do it, these days there's lots of people who will blow the whistle, will take it through, and there's arrests and fines and prosecutions going on a regular basis. There's formal classroom training available for people to recognize fraud and how to deal with it. But it starts with having a clear PSM plan, because that's what you're going to do. The problem around this is it's not just the fraud itself, but the fraud alienates the donors. The donors then stop giving money. They don't produce anymore. Already, a number of countries, Sweden, Germany, Denmark, have frozen the money to Global Fund. He said, you've got so much fraud, so much cheating going on, that we're not going to give you any more money. So having this level of fraud and corruption threatens the future funding for all healthcare commodities. So it's important that we try and minimize, we try and reduce that. And one way we do that is by having clear PSM plans. And that means we have to have due diligence. Clear plans that limit fraud and can detect fraud when it's there. So what we mean by due diligence, we're going to check everything. Financial case, check the documents, business case, risk analysis, we've talked a little bit about already, monitoring and analyzing the project all the time. All of that is going to go into the PSM plan. Oh, we've been working with Global Fund for 20 years. Do we really have to go through all this every time we want a grant? Yes, you do. Because it's not getting any better. 20 years, it's not improving. We're still seeing really poor PSM plans. 50% of PSM plans are rejected the first time they're submitted because we have weak administration. You're not sure if it's cheating or just incompetence that's going on. Often it's not connected with reality on the ground. We're doing things which aren't real. And we have poor implementation. So the point around the PSM plan is to force countries to think about what they are doing, what is practical, and how they can do it in the future. And if we look at all the different aspects of the Global Fund grants, number one problem is PSM. Key driver for low utilization. It's not happening. We're not getting the goods to the patients. So we're not seeing health improve. And that key problem is PSM. And that's why the PSM plan is so important to us. 20 years and no improvements. It's true. We're not getting any better. We're still doing the same stuff we did 20 years ago. We're still writing the same kinds of PSM plans, which get rejected and refused, that we were doing 20 years ago. We've really got to focus on the PSM plan, understand what's required, work it through, analyze it, and then produce PSM plans that are going to be accepted. So this PSM plan is a chance to force countries to make it work. Just recently at Empower, we did a survey of countries in Southeast Asia around COVID commodities. And really, we're just looking at some basic PSM parameters. So how many countries could tell me what their fill rate was? When the district makes a request, what percentage of that request can be filled by the central stores? Only a quarter of countries knew. They didn't know. They don't know what their fill rate is. When we asked for, okay, how many days were you out of stock? Don't know. No country. Out of 11 countries in Southeast Asia, no country knew. What was your expiry rate? Don't know. What's your damaged goods? I don't know. What's the value of the stock in the warehouse? I don't know. 20 years on, we don't have the basic information of how procurement supply chain works. Why should donors give you money when you've got no idea what you're doing? You don't have the basic information available. And COVID was a particular extreme case, but that's generally everywhere. No information, no data. So if we don't improve, we don't get good PSM planning, we're not going to keep getting funding. It's going to stop. Countries are just going to say, enough. These countries have had 20 years to improve and have gone nowhere. Now is time to make it happen. If we look at what is your supply chain maturity level, we have a tool that measures how good the supply chain is. And at the top of the list, we have the gold, and down at the bottom of the list, we have the canvas. Tools being done in 21 countries. Do you know what the maturity level is for your country? What's the supply chain maturity level for your country? In the Q&A session, I'll ask you again. But just think about that. If you don't even know what your maturity level is, how are you going to do any PSM planning? Now, donors don't expect your PSM plan to be perfect. If it was perfect, they wouldn't give you any money. But it does need to be realistic in your capacities and capabilities. How will you do it? How will you measure it? You can say, we don't know what the stock out rate is, but we're going to start measuring it. Okay. What's your KPI for measuring it? How are you going to measure it? You can't just keep saying, oh, we'll do it better. What are you going to do better? How are you going to do it better? Who is going to do it better? And who is going to pay for it? I'll just give you a simple example. Many of you have paid for this course yourself. Why isn't there funding available for you? Because you've never asked for any. In the PSM plans, less than 20% of PSM plans contain any funding for strengthening PSM, any funding for staff training. There's no money for your scholarships because you're not asking for any money for your scholarships. You're not putting it in the PSM plan. You've never thought about it. Just magic from the skies. People will pay themselves. This cannot go on. We need to put PSM strengthening in the PSM plan, and Global Fund will pay for it if you ask for it and make a clear case. Not guaranteed to pay, but if you don't ask for it, I guarantee they will not pay. So you need to be asking for PSM strengthening. Know what's poor, ask to strengthen it, including how, who, where, when, and how much is it going to cost to strengthen it. PSM plans need to include PSM strengthening. Another common problem with a PSM plan is just cut and paste. They take the plan from 3 years ago, just cut that section out and paste it into the plan again. Not going to work anymore. Global Fund is now saying if you don't get better, there's no money. The PSM plan doesn't match the project. So we're doing a project to reduce malaria, and you've got a PSM plan that's nothing about malaria. Not going to happen. The PSM plan is that we want 25 motorcycles. That's very good. How is that addressing the malaria? We need to look at product quality assurance. Who is going to do it? How are you going to do it? Oh, the lab will do it. What lab will do it? How many of your countries have got a lab approved to ISO standards? Not going to happen. Who is going to do it? How are you going to do it? Where, when, and how much is it going to cost? How are you going to monitor your performance throughout the PSM plan? And because they're so weak, 50% of PSM plans just get rejected on first application. People complain there's years of delays in Global Fund money. There are. And one of the reasons is because you keep writing rubbish PSM plans. It's got to be reworked and reworked and reworked again until we get something that looks like it could be approved. So the point around the PSM plan is to force you to think about what you're going to do. Now, one of the problems is PSM plans are often not written by PSM staff. It's often someone in the Ministry of Finance that gets to do it. They get the job and they write, they know nothing about PSM. So the first point around the PSM plan is for PSM to take charge of it. PSM must take charge of the PSM plan. And that means having the skills to be able to write and produce a PSM plan. And we hope the information in this course has pretty much given you those skills. So, point around the PSM plan is to think. Make time to think. Stop rushing. Think. Think again. Go and have a really good think. Now think again. And after that, you can think about starting. Most PSM plans are poor because they are rushed and they're not thought through. Failing to plan is planning to fail. You have to think about what you're going to do. So, what are the basics? What do you want to do? We want to reduce the amount of malaria in the country. Okay? How many patients are going to be treated? You don't decide that as PSM. That's a clinical decision. But that's the starting point. You're going to collect that information. What's the target number of patients to be treated? Okay? How are you going to do it? Well, you need to have diagnosis and you need to have treatment. You don't decide what the treatment is, but you need to get the standard treatment guidelines. You need to get the diagnostic guidelines so you can know what commodities are needed. When are you going to do it? When do the supplies need to arrive? When am I running out? What's my existing warehouse stock? What's in the pipeline? Who is going to do it? I don't mean the name of a person. Which body, which organization is going to do the PSM? What capacity do you have? Warehouse capacity, okay? How many pallet load locations do you have in your warehouse? We often see people saying, I've got a big warehouse. Well, that's really good. How big is it? How many square meters? How many pallet locations? Need to go and collect that information, because when we ask it, don't know. Go and measure it. You need to know for your PSM plan. What resources do you need? Every PSM plan says nothing. We don't need any reason. We can do it all ourselves. No, you can't. If you could do it all yourselves, you would be better by now. Look at what you need. Money, technical support, training. Ask for what you need. Recognize the shortfalls and gaps and ask for them. What's the risk that something can go wrong? You need to have a risk management approach, a risk mitigation approach. What's it going to cost? But estimates, and the Global Fund has lots of guidelines on how to put those estimates together. But fundamentally, who, why, what, and how needs to go into your plan. Now, a lot of this information is already available to you because many countries will have a World Health Organization, Global Fund, pharmaceutical country profile. And I hope by now, most of you have looked at yours for your country. If not, do so after this webinar, please. Find out what it is and look at the information that's contained in your country pharmaceutical profile. Here's an example. This is from Myanmar, used to be called Burma. Per capita spending, how much HIV/AIDS, what's the treatment, spending on medicine, all this kind of information is there, which can be drawn on to put into your PSM plan. So, WHO started doing these some years ago. Most countries have got one now available. And here's a list of all the countries that have got PSM plans. You can find them online. Takes a little bit of research. I hope you know by now that WHO changes its URL links nearly every hour. So you'll have to search for them online. They're not all in the same place. I can't give you a link because it moves every day. But look for your country profile, your country pharmaceutical profile. Look what information is available in there. That's a good source for your PSM plan. And there's 9 chapters in the plan, and you'll find them all there with information, medicine, financing, how much we're spending. Okay, and here is an example: pharmaceutical expenditure, share of public expenditure, market share of generics. All that information is there in the pharmaceutical country profile. There is a complete guide to writing the Global Fund Procurement and Supply Management Plan. All the information is there. Make sure you get the updated one. The last one is June 2021. It's probably about time another one coming out about now. So do keep an eye on it. There's a good framework there. There's good information to guide you through the kind of products that you can have from Global Fund if you ask them. And again, all aspects, waste management. People don't ask for any money to do it. Why not? Because they don't think about it. So PSM people, you should be thinking about it. Include some funding for waste management into the PSM plan. Read a few PSM plans, look at them. And as you look at them, try to look who, what, and how are they doing things. That's the kind of level of detail required. Who is going to do it? In this case, the National TB Control Programme. What are they going to do? Strengthening of medical stores. How are they going to do it? That's what you need. That's the level of detail that you need to have in the PSM plan. You'll find complete guide online. This was working on Friday. I'm not sure if it's working today, but you'll be able to find the Global Fund PSM plan easily enough. It's a full template that you need to complete. And here is a proposal template. Now, for module 10, you don't need to enter the value of the products. You don't need to do a quantification. If you've got a past PSM plan, it's okay to use it, but you don't need to enter those values. It's really around all the other information that we want to see entered. So here we are, management capacity. What is your capacity? Procurement policies and systems. Who is in charge? Who's responsible for doing it? Do you need any additional staff or technical assistance? And 98% of PSM plans say no. Have you got all the policies? Have you got everything you need? Have you all got job descriptions? You got everything written out? No. Then you need to ask for some support, for some funding, for some strengthening. Quality assurance. Who is going to do it? Do we need to do it? No, we can do it all ourselves. No, you can't. You need to ask for support, for funding, to help you develop quality assurance, and so on down all the list. Forecasting, maybe you can do that really well. Maybe you don't need any additional assistance. That's okay, if you really feel that's the case. But too often, you're not asking. You're not thinking about what you actually need to do. All these areas, rational use. How is your program for rational medicine use? Good program, is it? In most countries, it's hardly anything. So it needs strengthening. That needs to be included in the PSM plan. Think about what you are doing. Then, how are you going to do the forecasting? Who's going to do it? How are you going to do the procurement planning? How are you going to do the inventory management? Who, how, when? That's what needs to go in. Oh, forecasting, yeah, we can do it. That's not going to get you any money. Who is going to do it? How are you going to do it? You're going to use consumption, morbidity. You're going to use combined methods. How are you going to put the forecasting team together? Who's paying for all the forecasting team? Where's the funding coming from? How much funding do you need? So on for every section like that, thinking about what is required. And it doesn't have to be one size fits all. If we think about malaria bed nets, they're very bulky, they're heavy. Maybe I don't want to put those through medical stores. Maybe for the bed nets, I'll use a private contractor for the distribution. That's fine. The medicines, I'm going to put through the main pharmaceutical stores. But the bed nets, we'll use an external contractor to do it outside. Vector control spraying for insects. I don't want to mix those chemicals in with my pharmaceuticals. I want them in a separate store. So maybe I'll put those through the Ministry of Agriculture or a private contractor to distribute them. Some countries order motorcycles and petrol engines or diesel generators. I don't want that in my pharmaceutical store. I want that stored separately, distributed separately. And it's fine to do that. But think about it. Otherwise, everything's going to come in to your one stores. And that's not good. Think about each stage of the operation, how you're going to do it. So the key point around this is take time, plan. Plan the plan, plan the cost of the planning. Consult, detail, detail, and detail. Which forecasting procedures? Where the numbers coming from? How reliable? How are you going to review and revise it? What's the volume of storage that you've got? All the way through, and how you're going to monitor and report on it. That's the PSM plan. Okay, I've talked a lot. Now it's time for the next Q&A session. Chat box. Kindly let me know how pooled procurement prevents fraud. All right. Okay. Depends who is doing the pooled procurement, is the answer. Okay. Okay, Vivian, please go ahead on mute and ask the question.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Prof.
Greetings.
Thank you very much for this. Because I was to even start up anything, and I had to go to the regional delegation to apply. Really, I went to the HIV regional office in my country where I work and where I stay, so that I could even get, because I wanted to, initially I wanted to have the difficulties in ARVs supply in a war area like where I am. Yep. So I went to the regional office, and I was asked to get an ethical clearance before I could have any information. So I wrote to the administrator of the group of the school, and I've not had the ethical clearance or how to go about it. I asked for a supervisor to really put me through personally, because I've been having a lot of difficulties with it. And then for the ethical clearance, I've not had it. And one recommendation to have the ethical clearance, or one company of that ethical clearance, was a cover page from the school. So I've not been able to have it. Now we have to do the PSM plan. I see it as there's going to be another difficulty going to the national office now to do this. There, I will surely be, the ethical clearance will surely be another hindrance. Is it possible that we could be given that so that we can go ahead with the work?
Certainly, if you send me the contact details to the national office, I will write to them directly. Okay. Requesting that clearance. Okay, I don't know if they'll give it, but I will certainly write to them directly. And if you can't get that, I will try and get some information for you from previous PSM plans. Okay, but you should have a country profile available, and some of the information will be in the country profile.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So please drop me a line with the contact at the national office, and I will write to them directly.
Okay, Prof. Thank you.
Okay, you asked about pooled procurement. Okay, it depends. Okay, for a country of a population below 5 million, you're probably not buying enough medicine to go directly to a manufacturer. So you're probably going to a wholesaler or an agent. When you do that, it increases the risk of fraud occurring. So by going directly to the supplier, the main manufacturer, you reduce the risk of fraud. And that's one of the ways that pooled procurement does it. For large population countries, Nigeria at 200 million plus, they have enough volume to go directly to manufacturers. Small population countries like Botswana, Namibia, Lesotho, they don't have enough population. So for them, pooled procurement is a real advantage. You can put that together and reduce the risk of working through a whole chain of intermediaries going directly to the manufacturers. That's one of the ways in which pooled procurement restricts the amount of corruption and fraud that can occur. Okay. There are any further questions? You can enter them in the chat box or just raise your hand. We have around another 5 minutes. Okay, regarding a country's inability to execute what was originally stated in the PSM plan, okay, that depends how that came about. I mean, if there's a conflict zone, if there's an active war, if there's a major disruption, then of course that's understandable. But again, we expect the PSM plan to contain a mitigation. Risk management. What is the risk of social unrest? What's the risk of a war? What's the risk of geographic disruption? If I take the geographic disruption, country like Indonesia has 523 district medical stores. It's in a geologically active area. There are earthquakes, tsunami, volcanoes, eruptions. They lose one medical store nearly every month. So they have a mitigation plan to replace the medical stores. They understand the risk. So if you're working in a conflict zone, what is the risk? How are you going to mitigate for that risk? And really, it's looking at how to mitigate it. Of course, if it's no fault of your own, they're not going to hold you to it. But too often, there's not been enough risk planning. That can be difficult. And the attempt here is to force countries into risk planning and risk mitigation. Look at the risk. How can we reduce those risks? Theft from the warehouse, increase security. Okay, I see Daharu Makama. Please unmute and ask your questions. Yeah, Dahiru, go ahead, please. Unmute.
Okay, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon, sir.
Greetings.
Yeah, thank you. I want to ask about two questions, sir. Number one, regarding the dissertation. Can I submit two topics for approval?
We prefer to keep to one, but if you really want to do two, it's okay if you think you can manage the workload.
No, what I'm trying to say is, can I send two topics, then you select one for me?
No, you have to select the topic. You decide what you want to do.
Okay, and then that is one. Number two, sir, can one select a particular product? Let's say if you are dealing with the malaria, can you choose one, let's say like artemisinin? You know, we have the shortage of this very artemisinin here in Nigeria, particularly in Nasarawa State, North Central State in Nigeria. Many hospitals now, many facilities now doesn't have the malaria's drug itself. So this particular artemisinin, we have shortage of that very drug. So I don't know if one can do the dissertation on that very drugs.
Yes. Yep. No problem. You can select an individual product. Yes. No problem at all.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
No
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prof.
Okay. I think we've got just 2 minutes left. So have you got any last questions? Okay, Priya, if we're okay, then we'll close the session here.
Yes, sir. Definitely. If we have no further questions, we can close this session.
Okay.
Or if you still have any further questions, please feel free to drop me an email. I will forward it to Wendy, sir. Thank you so
Okay.
much for your presence. Thank you, sir, for your support and your time.
Okay, good night, good afternoon, good morning to all, wherever you are in the world. It's nighttime here for me, but okay, now I can go back to work. Okay.
Okay,
All
Prof,
right.
thanks very much for your time.
Okay, no problem.
Share.
Thank you so much, Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay. All right.
Thank
Bye
you.
to all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.